Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Text But in Words, which is a new podcast we're doing for Scanline Media, where we have a roundtable discussion of a specific topic. And this week, we're doing Batman and the Arkham games. I'm Colin Dettmar from Scanline Media.
I am Unkle from Scanline Media.
And I'm Johnny Niska from Bottle Crow and formerly of other things.
Yeah, occasional co-conspirator Johnny.
Currently from the internet.
Always from the internet, Johnny.
Always.
Always. It's a country that will never abandon you, but will constantly betray you.
So, sounds about right, yes.
Now that we're getting into it, the wave of emotion is coming back, because God, the Arkham games, right?
Yeah, so we're here to talk about Batman, the Arkham... the Arkham trilogy.
Specifically the Batman Arkham trilogy. I guess we can talk about, origins, but I didn't play it. I don't think Johnny played it, and...
I did play it some, yeah.
I mean,
oh, okay.
We're gonna talk about Arkham Knight, and that's also a game that only I played to completion, so...
That's true.
Yeah.
But, I did a lot of reading and judging from the sidelines, so that's almost as good.
I've seen someone play it. That's practically the same thing.
So, are we all in agreement that Arkham Asylum was a good game?
Yes, it's fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, and I know, Johnny, you recently went back to it because you had some concerns that maybe it actually wasn't. What was your finding?
Okay, so my concern wasn't so much that it wasn't good, but I did have a lot of concerns that maybe memory treats it better than it deserves. And having spent a few hours with it now, I think I was right to be concerned, because I loved that game when it came out. I loved it at the time, and there's still a lot of things about it that is really good. The level design is super tight. The story actually kind of makes sense. It's a very well put together game, but even with all of that, going back to it now with the Batman style combat not feeling as fresh, man, it's just that part feel like it's aged so much in these years.
And there's certain things on reflection about the presentation and stuff like that that just stick out like a sore thumb, like both Gordon and Mayor Sharp are voiced by the exact same person. There's a bit of everything looks kind of incredibly grainy whenever they switch to cutscenes using that old Unreal codec or whatever. And
yeah.
I mean, I remember noticing that voice actor thing at the time, and it didn't bother me. I don't know.
I never noticed it because I never noticed those things at all.
Well, they have the exact same voice. That's the part that I can get over.
Yeah, I mean, the voice actor doesn't really make much of an effort to make them sound different. A little bit of one, but really not very much. And I don't know, it didn't bother me that much, but I think, I don't know. I mean, I haven't gone back to it in a little while, I guess a couple of years. I did go back a couple of times after beating it. I think I went back specifically after beating Arkham City and being like, was I crazy? Was this game not good? And I was like, no, this was good. And I don't know, I feel like there's some aspects to it, I think there are specifically some boss fights and some sequences in Asylum that are not great. But I think the combat works better in that one because I don't think it does a good enough job of pushing the player to get good at the combat, but I also think it doesn't overcomplicate itself like the games after it does.
Sure, but I think it's better than the other ones. But let's kind of look at it at first by its own merits. I think it's a very, very well put together game, and that combat genuinely kind of works in the first one, but there are things about Arkham Asylum's writing that really hasn't evolved as the rest of the gaming industry has started to grow up a bit. Like, in the intro sequence where you're like walking the Joker back into the asylum, several guards just straight up refer to the inmates as psychos in like really hostile tones. Just the way that game treats mental health is kind of fucked up.
Yeah, there's that entire bit where an entire type of enemy introduced is just this raving lunatic type that they're not criminals or anything like that, but they're still shown as this extreme threat, and Batman just concusses them. He just punches them out, and it's this really... At the time, when I was like a teenager playing it in high school, I didn't really think much of it, but thinking back on it and watching some footage later, it's like, wow, this is a bit much.
Well, one of the things that that Asylum does that the City doesn't do is that the majority of the criminals that you're punching are not actually mental health inmates. They are just there temporarily because they blew up the prison. That's literally why most of those are at Arkham. But after they establish that, they sort of just mix everything together, and it's hard to... Like, Batman has no way of knowing if the people he's sneaking up on and punching are people from Blackgate or just mental health institute people.
I mean, I think a couple of things about that, I guess. Like, I don't like the larger trend of games treating mental health in a pretty gross way. But, like, this is a cartoon world where this asylum is full of people with, like, super-powered double personalities and shit. This is the world of Two-Face and the Joker and the Riddler. And in that world, like, people who probably just have some mental issues and need some counseling probably don't go to this asylum. They probably go to a normal asylum.
Well, that's the thing. Like, the Arkham Asylum very strongly, like, they talk about how the Arkham Asylum is mostly a normal asylum for, like, basically the way the game describes this is normal crazy people.
They do the exact opposite, as I recall. There is a big part, like, a lot of ambient stuff is talking about how Arkham Asylum has, in recent years, become really big on rehabilitation of psychotically violent people, especially supervillains.
They do both. Like, they talk quite extensively how the more low security areas are filled with normal people who just have one or two issues that they need looked after.
Sure, but I mean, it's not like... I never got, maybe this is just my memory, but I never got the impression that Batman is just going around beating the shit out of every living being in this prison. He's going after the ones that are loose and causing trouble.
He's going after pretty much anyone who isn't wearing a uniform that makes them part of the staff.
Well, but, like, the people, like, he's going after people who are in the company of the folks who have guns. As a general thing. Like, there are no situations in the game where you stumble into a room full of people who are just hanging out and do not appear to have violent intentions who you beat the shit out of.
That is totally not true. Like, I played this game today. There are many points where I just, like, there's a guy in a corridor. He may or may not be violent. He may or may not be dangerous. I am sneaking up on him and I am just choking him out at this point.
But they have, like, guns or pipes.
No, not all of them. Far from all of them. The majority do not have any weapons.
There's also this sequence where they're just lined up and clapping, and it...
Yeah, that part, yeah.
Yeah, you can pretty much just go ahead and go to town on them.
Well, but... I don't know. I feel like you guys are being a little unfair. I mean, I do think there are some problems, but, like, like, that part specifically, like, they are out-and-out Joker's henchmen, and I'm not saying that makes it okay for Batman to beat them up, but there is no, like, oh, these are just innocent people. It is very clear that they are Joker's assistants, and they are lining up and clapping because Joker told them to line up and clap as you ran in to fight him.
A lot of the inmates currently at Arkham are Joker's henchmen, but the game does not at any point after introducing that attempt to distinguish between Joker's henchmen and the rest of the inmates, which is my entire point.
I see.
Yeah, a few of them get little physical Joker markings, but most of them are just giant burly men.
Yeah. And the intention may very well be that they just don't show any of the other inmates, but the effect it has is that, like, you come out of that game feeling like those are the inmates of Arkham. Like, the Joker's henchmen are the people who are in that place. Which is literally true of the sequels, but is not supposed to be true in this game.
Yeah.
And it feels like it fumbles it.
That's a fair point.
Well, I think City actually did an interesting thing where the range of people that were in prison were a lot more. There were people that were in prison, but they weren't related to the Joker or Penguin or any of those people, and you pretty much had to save them from getting beat up by other Joker-affiliated prisoners and stuff.
Some of them.
Yeah.
And some of them you would be going, like, in a way, Arkham City is way worse about this, because you would literally be going around the open world, and there would be, I mean, the game depicts them as thugs, I guess, but just people standing around being like, I hear Batman's on the loose. Oh man, I don't want to get on his bad side, and then you kick them in the face and break their necks.
Yeah.
They're just hanging the fuck out. They're not doing anything.
City starts going bad with that. Origins has a huge problem with that as well, where it's like, oh, everyone has escaped, and you're just tracking down people and punching the shit out of them.
Yeah, and they actually motivate you in a way to do it, right or wrong. They both in City, Origins, and Night, they'll give them dialogue where they're talking about women like this bitch and that bitch, and they talk about how Batman's not so tough and stuff like that. They're basically trying to provoke you to come down and beat them senseless without any provocation besides, I was listening to you talk, so punch.
And of course, it gives you experience for doing so.
Yeah. And one of the things I discovered in Asylum replaying that is that you get more experience if you just start punching someone than if you do a stealth takedown on them. So it's in your interest to, if you can get away with it, just start wailing away at them instead of taking them down in a safer manner.
Yeah.
So, but despite that, despite those complaints, generally, Arkham Asylum, like, compared to the rest of the series, does not have that many problems. It's a pretty well-structured game, and it shares some issues with the rest of Batman, but it doesn't go out of its way to invent new problems of its own, at least.
Yeah.
I think the most impressive part about Asylum is just how tightly paced it is. Like, I've played through the game, like, 5 or 6 different times, and it just... the way that it flows is incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, the pacing is really good.
There are parts of it where the pacing kind of falters, like a lot of, like, the Poison Ivy stuff kind of slows things down in a way that I at least didn't find super enjoyable. But it's pretty good, and compared to the rest of the series, it's fantastic. Arkham City's pacing is unbelievably bad.
It's ridiculous. It's, yeah, like... it is almost unfathomable that the same team made those games.
See, I felt like with City, they managed to kind of expand the scope, and sure, some of the side quest stuff was a bit silly at times, but most of the time I found all that extra content fascinating. Like, the whole Alice in Wonderland bit was a nice change of pace, and it was fun tracking down Hush and going through all of that.
I think Hush was Origins, actually. I don't think he was in City. But the point, actually, like, I don't disagree with that, but the way that they structured things, where it was just like, bam, new villain, bam, new villain, bam, new villain, bam, new villain, and no one had any weight because of it. Like, Bane in that game, in Arkham Asylum, Bane was a, like, full fucking section of that game. And in Arkham City, you meet up with him and he says, go break these vats that are in the open world, and you do it, and you come back, and he tries to punch you, and you dodge, and he gets his arm stuck in a wall. And that's Bane. Done. You beat him. It's like, are you fucking serious? Like, that is the biggest problem with Arkham City, is that it tries to do so much in so little time that, one, there is no build-up action. It's just immediately into, like, a series of what, you know, they're trying to make, like, a series of... Fuck, what's the word I'm looking for? It's constantly trying to hit a climax without ever having any rising or falling action. It's just a series of climaxes strung together, and it drains the whole thing of any meaning. Because there's no tension, there's no build-up, there's no suspense, there's no world building. It is just constantly a stream of villains that you beat in about 10 minutes each.
I don't remember them taking that little time to get through. And also, the way that it was...
It really depends on the villain, but...
Yeah, the way that it was structured for me, it was like, they've been planning this for a while, and they've got, instead of Batman walking into Arkham Asylum, and this is the time, basically, in Arkham City, they're so packed and ready for this specific event that everyone has been clustered together due to the size, and that's just a natural part of that. The way that it flowed for me was fine.
But then why is he so, like, okay, if the villains are more prepared than ever, and they're better geared, and Batman is caught off guard, why does disposing of Bane take a couple of hours in the first game and maybe 15 minutes in the other one? Like, the way they structure things with villains they've already dealt with before just makes Batman look incompetent. Like, okay, what were you doing in Asylum? Just fucking around? If you can deal with these guys this quick, because yes, some of them take a little while longer, but it really does just go through villains like a fucking food processor in that game.
So my problem with all of this, like, in City, everyone just felt inconsequential. Like, you bounced from thing to thing, and it was never quite clear why you were interacting with these people, and what impact it had on the overall plot that was happening.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about City that I was not a fan of was the whole Talia al Ghul thing. Because, like, within, like what Colin said, like, a few hours, they expected, or like, 1 or 2 hours, they kind of expected you to already be walking in with the understanding, okay, Batman has a relationship with Talia. Batman really likes Talia. Oh wait, she's dead within a very short amount of time, and we're supposed to feel something about it, but nope. I do not feel anything when Talia dies in Arkham City.
Yeah, totally. And also, like, I feel like a part of it, the way, like, it feels like a Call of Duty campaign, right? Where they came up with what was going to happen, and then they came up with why. It's like, oh, we've got to fight Mr. Freeze. Why? I don't know, he's got some science thing we need. You know? Like...
Yeah.
Why are we fighting Penguin? I think there was a reason there. I don't fucking remember. And I remember game stories.
Have you seen the movie Batman Under the Red Hood?
I have.
Arkham City, to me, feels like Batman Under the Red Hood. Batman Under the Red Hood just, like... A lot of Batman fans actually recommended this movie to me. I think it's absolute garbage. Batman Under the Red Hood just introduces a new villain every 5 minutes. It has, like... It contains, like, 2 different Robins. It contains the Joker. It contains Ra's al Ghul. And this is, like, a 1 hour, 20-minute movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Arkham City felt to me.
I think the difference, though, is that Under the Red Hood is meant for people who already know Batman and its lore, and the Arkham series is not supposed to be like that. The Arkham series is supposed to stand on its own. Like, I think Under the Red Hood is good. I don't think it's good as a standalone work. I think it's good as a person who already knows what these characters are.
Yeah, the whole thing with Batman Arkham Asylum is that I went in knowing almost nothing about any of the Batman heroes or villains or anything like that. And the way that they had you solving riddles to find out more about what these people were was really clever. Like, back then the Riddler stuff actually felt like it gave some context to everything happening around you, and it felt like it was taking its time to introduce you to something that other people had been interested in for decades.
Yeah. Though even then, like, a lot of the trophies felt kind of, like, the literal trophies, like the big question marks in the world, felt a little weak. Though, like, find a vantage point puzzles and stuff, the Riddler stuff that was like that, felt decent. But, the actual riddles. But just the hidden collectibles felt weak then. And by the point of City, it just felt like a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, it's been said a lot that, or used to be said a lot back when Arkham Asylum was new, that like that game had a lot of restraint in how it handled things, and I think that's true. I think like one of the biggest differences between Arkham Asylum and its sequels is that Arkham Asylum didn't just do literally everything that they could, but actually picked and choose the things that are valuable to do. But even with that, the Riddler stuff it is way too much, even in Asylum, I think.
I think it's a little bit too much. I don't think it's way too much, because I think, like, kind of like Jen says, the way they use it to make you explore the world and learn more about the characters. Like, there's a puzzle where when you're outside in a specific part of the world, you have to, like, get a, like, sort of, you know how you, like, scan in things to sort of, like, you solve riddles by basically proving you're looking at the right thing.
Yeah.
And there's one where it's like, you've got to go look at Gotham Tower. And it's like, oh, you get some, like, oh, right, this is Bruce Wayne's company. Here's his big building because he sort of is in charge of the city. And if you don't know this going in, this little riddle helps you sort of fill in the fact of, like, oh, Batman has tons of money because he's a billionaire. That's why he has all this gear. And they do a lot of little things like that I think are an enjoyable way to fill you in on the story. But by City, you're doing things where Batman is basically the Saw killer, and you're doing, like, platforming puzzles to turn off a set of traps so that you can rescue, like, a construction worker or something. And then by Arkham Knight, he wants you to play Mario Kart.
Oh yeah,
what the fuck?
The idea that he has had all this time to construct all these incredibly elaborate race courses in Knight is just... it's the worst thing I've ever seen. Like, it's the worst side content I've ever seen in the game, likely, most likely.
It barely works. With the Riddler character barely excuses what they do in Arkham Knight, where they have all these kind of elaborate things, but they are actually brain teasers. They are things where he didn't have to do a lot of stuff in the world, he just had to do a lot of research to sort of try and trick you, because that isn't within the Riddler character.
You mean in Arkham Asylum?
Yes, excuse me. But yeah, by Arkham City, when he was setting up elaborate boomerang puzzles... Sorry, batarang. Excuse me. Blasphemy. Elaborate batarang puzzles. It's like... What does this have to do with brain teasers and proving you're smarter than me? And then, yeah, by Arkham Knight, it's like they're not even pretending. It's just like, I am the Riddler and I am Lord of Collectibles. It's just...
I am Lord of Side Quests. Fear me.
Yeah, when you start thinking about it, in Arkham City, how did Riddler know exactly the trajectory of your batarangs, unless he somehow got access to your stuff?
How did he know what tools you would bring when you didn't? How did he have puzzles set up for Mr. Freeze's frost grenades when you didn't know Mr. Freeze would be there, and you certainly didn't know you'd take his tech and reinvent it into frost grenades?
It is, even in Arkham Asylum, it is really fucking... convenient how Batman happens to have some explosive gel in the trunk of the Batmobile, and every wall on Arkham Island is brittle as fuck.
That one I feel like, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of video gaminess going on in a way that I find acceptable, but also, like, I mean, it's an old building, and Batman has blown shit up before. That one I feel like is excusable, but like...
I feel like the extent of it is a bit silly in Arkham.
I think that's fair. But, like, yeah, I mean, in City, some of the gadgets, like, I mean, specifically the frost grenades was the point where I was like, this feels like Metroid Fusion and you're giving me the ice missiles. Like, what are you doing? It was just bizarre.
So I guess the thing that gave me the most hope going forward after City was the part where they just... Oh, we're gonna spoil things. Just, I don't know if we've said that already, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Major spoiler disclaimer. We're talking about these games. We're gonna fucking talk about them.
So yeah, anyway, the Joker gets brutally murdered in City. And,
I don't know if it was that brutal.
Well...
He died to poison, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It was pretty much lingering poison stuff from his Titan out in the first game. And,
yeah.
Basically, that gave me hope for, like, okay, they're probably gonna have to try something new next time. They're gonna have to think of something else. They're gonna really have to... They're basically killing the biggest villain, and that gave me hope that they had something interesting planned. And then...
Yeah, and they're killing off the biggest, like, staple of the series, and Mark Hamill is doing interviews where he's saying, yeah, I'm done doing the Joker voice.
Yeah. And to be fair with that, I'm totally fine with Mark Hamill doing that, because it kind of makes sense for him to basically say that as a sort of a clever trick to eventually come to what we're going to discuss later with Asylum. But yeah, once Origins came around, and that they brought back the Joker, it was like, okay, they're off here, they're having someone else develop it, so of course they're going to do an origin story and find a way to get the Joker to bring back. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to trudge through this. And then, once I got to the point in Night, where they just straight up bring Joker back, Mark Hamill included, as a hallucination that's with you for almost the entire game, that just made me so angry, because it felt like they had straight up lied about all of this.
They straight up lied about a lot of things. Like, they straight up... We're spoiling stuff. So, the Arkham Knight character, they made a big deal about how this was a new character, and, like, his origins were related to the past games, and it would be a shocking reveal. And it's the fucking Red Hood. It's the Red Hood from the comics, who is not featured at all in the previous games. He doesn't have any connection to the previous events.
Yeah, it's like... Arkham Knight is the first time, I think, that the game universe even acknowledges that Robin ever existed.
Or there were multiple.
No. He's in Arkham City. Like, there is a point in Arkham City, actually one point in Arkham City that I really like, which is when, like, Batman gets, like, a signal, and he's running across a rooftop, and Robin jumps down, he's like, hey, you should have called me, I heard there was trouble, I'm here to help. And Batman's like, fuck off, I got this. You little prick, go away.
I thought that was Nightwing, but yeah.
Nightwing is one of the Robins.
Yeah. They kind of laid the groundwork for multiple Robins and multiple all that stuff, but they had given no sign previously in this universe that Batman had wronged one of the Robins in any sort of way.
Yeah. And, I mean, specifically, I believe the Robin that they show in Arkham City very briefly. Maybe it was under a different circumstance, but I know they show Tim Drake Robin in that. But, like, no, there is zero mention of Jason Todd in any of those games. Maybe in, like, some, like, personnel file or something. But, like, no. They just straight up fucking lied.
And it's so fucking predictable as well. Like, I remember Ben just telling me that, the villain isn't actually new, and I immediately like, oh, it's Red Hood, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's so obvious. Like, why? Oh God, what they did to the plot of these games, City and onward, just makes me so sad.
Well, the plot with Night is... I could just go on and on and on about the plot of Night, because they make all other 3 games, Origins included, look like freaking masterpieces in terms of writing. Because, like, not even an hour after you've met Night, Alfred's like, who could this be? And Batman's like, I don't know, I've angered a lot of people. And immediately it's like, okay, yeah, it doesn't really matter who it is, right? None of this really matters. None of this matters why we're here, why... Yeah, there's no stakes at all, except when they decide to suddenly kidnap and quote-unquote shoot Oracle.
I had managed to completely forget about all of that. That's
really?
right, they do all of that bullshit.
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, they have, like, your first interaction with Catwoman is going to meet her because Riddler has kidnapped her and put an explosive cat collar on her. Like, oh yeah, good job, that's not...
Isn't that pretty
problematic
much, like,
imagery?
Isn't that... That's very similar to how you introduce a Catwoman in City.
Yeah, well, and also... the very first interaction that you have in the world of Arkham Knight, or at least one of the very first, is just going to rescue Poison Ivy from a room where she's being held captive.
Just, like...
Why would you even rescue Poison Ivy? Who gives a shit?
Yeah, even she is rolling her eyes when Batman's rescuing her and putting her in the cell. She even straight up says, I can break out of this at any moment, right? I'm just playing along nicely with you because I want to.
Because you're so hot and handsome, Batman, and because every woman in this fucking series is enamored with Batman and only exists to motivate Batman to do things.
Pretty much.
Yay! Comic book writing.
Not even comic book writing.
DC writing.
Not even comic book writing. This series is writing. Like, there have certainly been points in the series in Batman, like the Batman comics, where female characters have been treated with a modicum of respect, and it just hasn't happened in this. Like, this is fucking Rocksteady. This is their fucking issue.
Arkham Asylum, like, I don't know. Some stuff with Ivy was problematic, but at least they didn't pull bullshit with Oracle in that one.
Arkham Asylum was fine because female characters didn't matter. That's the only reason.
I guess that's fucking true.
Yeah, I should probably remind you guys that at least the first 2 games were both written by longtime Batman writer Paul Dini. I'm not sure about the Arkham Origins or Arkham Knight, but from the very beginning they have had DC people working on this, so as far as I'm concerned, it's as much a DC problem as it is a Rocksteady problem.
That, I appreciate you pointing that out. Maybe I was a little out of line there. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it is Rocksteady making the game and saying, yeah, this is cool with us. Like, I would believe that with Asylum and even City, they had to ask a lot of permission of DC for everything they wanted to do. But by the point that they were making Arkham Knight, I am all but certain that they had a lot more creative control over that.
It's hard to say because WB has proven to be something of a... they're one of the worst publishers, flat out. Like, they...
Sure.
They act in
but
ridiculous ways.
I don't, like, they're the worst publisher in the way that they treat, like, in the way that they don't respect the customer, right? In the way they screw people on DLC and season passes, and the way that they have ports that don't fucking work, and the way they don't do their fucking due diligence and do their job. I don't know that they've proven themselves to be raging misogynists.
True. That's more of the DC
I think
side.
That's
that...
I don't know. I don't want to, like, as weird as this sounds to say, I don't want to get too caught up in the misogyny, because, well, I think that's the biggest problem these games have. It is far from the only problem they have, and even if that didn't exist, these games would be massive disappointments.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go out to say that I think every game in the series after Asylum is kind of garbage, including City.
I'm gonna say bad. I'm not gonna go as far as garbage.
I still really like City. I came back to it recently, and the way that it plays still incredibly satisfying. And there's something about the scale of the city where it's not gigantic, but it's just nice enough that you feel amazing just gliding through the air, taking care of all these problems.
I didn't, because it felt like a fake city. It felt like a villainous version of Disneyland. Like, this is a weird world where the only thing that exists are people to beat up or a few people to rescue. There is nothing about this that suggests that it was ever a place where human beings lived.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I don't find the type of traversal where it's like, oh, I'm just flying over all the level design to be interesting.
Yeah, glide and grapple is not. It's the poor man's Spider-Man 2.
I think that ruined the franchise, frankly. Like, that's the death knell of it. Because once you introduce that, then you need to make the map a lot bigger, and then you can't put the same detail and care into the base level design as Asylum had. And Asylum lived and died by its level design. That was what made it so good. And when you take that away in City, then there's nothing left.
Yeah. And as weird as the constant gargoyles were in Arkham Asylum, there was at least a cheap excuse. When you got to the point in Arkham City where you were going into the foundry and there were, like, mock-up gargoyles in the smelting plant, it's like, what the fuck? This doesn't make any goddamn sense.
See, the thing that ultimately kind of killed my appeal for the Batman series kind of over time is I used to kind of roll my eyes at the whole people talking about Ubification of games, because that's a very personal... I think that Ubisoft mostly does that sort of stuff in Asylum, and not many other developers have kind of gone to that sort of length before. But in Arkham Knight, they went to that length.
Yeah.
They have tailing missions. Remember those tailing missions in Assassin's Creed?
I do.
That everyone loves so much? Well, they are not good. And they are not any better when you're playing them as Batman.
Be honest, they're a little bit better when you're playing as Batman, because you're Batman.
A little, but at the same time, you're still following this truck that you just have to stay out of sight for a little bit before it's like, okay, we lost him. Let's go ahead and drive directly back to the base instead of, parking the truck somewhere else. But for me, the thing that completely broke my patience for the game are the Firefly missions. Because here's this dude in a giant jetpack that's setting the entire city on fire, and you go through this whole sequence where you get in your Batmobile, you chase him down until he runs out of fuel, you leap from the Batmobile, you tackle him, you punch the hell out of him, and then all of a sudden, you let him go, and then you are like, okay, do that 3 more times.
Catch and release.
No. Yeah. You don't catch and release someone that is setting the city on fire. That is not cool, Batman.
If they built it into Batman's character that he didn't actually care about solving crime and he just enjoyed the chase, that actually would make an amusing game. But that's not what they did. They just made it not make sense.
Yeah.
So, Colin, your brief comment about how it's better because you're Batman. Man, maybe I just don't want to be Batman anymore. Maybe I just think that Batman kind of sucks. Maybe that's part of the problem now.
I don't think he's a cool dude. I don't think we would hang out. But I think he's an interesting and enjoyable character for what he means for a work. I think the balance of that they fuck up, okay, if we're going to get into one of the other things that everybody talks about, is the fact that Batman is just murdering people. He really, pretending that he's being non-lethal is a fucking joke.
Yeah, totally.
But ostensibly, the idea that he is not killing people, but not out of any sense of morals. It's just this arbitrary line that he's drawn, because by his actions, by the way he fucking brutalizes these people, it's very clear he doesn't actually care for their well-being. He's just drawn this bizarre line in the sand. I think that can make for a pretty interesting dynamic. Like...
Yeah, they just never really address it properly.
No, they don't. But, like, you know, the minor examples, like, one of the things I did like in Arkham City, one of the new moves they introduced was the disarms, where you broke their weapon. They added too many new moves in City, and my understanding is they add too many new moves in Night, to the point where, like, sometimes it was hard to get what you wanted, because there were just so many damn inputs.
Oh yeah, with Knights, there's a situation where they add things like guard deflex, and they also add, okay, here are these medics that will revive people, and Arkham Knight the Arkham combat system has never been built for targeting a dude specifically.
No.
So then when they ask you to target a dude specifically, you're fumbling to remember what button does what button does the whole sprint takedown or the multi-takedown, and it just becomes this giant bumbling list of inputs that you cannot keep straight, and you die more often than not because it just expects you to do things that the engine is not capable of rendering smoothly.
Yeah, but like in Arkham City, when you did that disarm combo move against people with shields, I mean, they were like riot shields with a little window, and what Batman would do is he ripped the shield out of their hand, he smashed it over their head so that their head went through the window, and then he broke the thing over his knee as they fell to the ground. It's like, okay, technically you didn't kill that man, but he's gonna need some hospital time. And obviously I think that's real shitty in a human being, but for a video game, I think that can be an interesting dynamic.
In Arkham Asylum, there's a point where you enter a room it's this entire room, except for the top floor, is just filled with Joker gas, his laughing gas. And there's a prisoner hanging from a rope from the ceiling, and you can just throw a batarang at it and have him drop down into the lethal Joker gas.
I thought they gave you a mission failed if you did that.
I did that today.
Oh.
It did not.
No, it definitely doesn't give you a mission failed if you do that. It gives you a mission failed if you let that happen to any of the civvies or something. But
that is... Batman straight up murdered that dude.
Yeah. No, these games have never really gotten that right. And in Asylum, they mostly avoid the subject. Like, that is one point where they definitely don't. But in City, and especially, like, in Arkham Knight, the degrees that they take it to is just that it makes Batman seem... Well, it makes the game seem delusional. Batman's always been delusional, but the game seems delusional. It's like, no, Batman doesn't kill people. He just runs over them with tanks and shoots their car with, like, car stopper tank rounds. Like, oh yeah, no, I'm sure those people are alright after you shot their car with fucking rockets.
Yeah, I feel like basically every piece of Batman media I have ever consumed is delusional about Batman. And I've talked about this with you in the past, Colin, so I know that you think there is some Batman media that acknowledges that Batman is, for lack of a better term, full of shit. But I have not seen it.
Well, in the Arkham games particularly, they'll do that really tiresome cliche where they'll take like a minute off to say like, hey Batman, you're not such a good guy after all, aren't you? But then Batman's just like, and continues fighting.
Well, and they don't do it in a way like, look at all these people you've murdered. It's just a cliche video game, like JRPG villain, we're the same, you and I. And it's like, oh, fuck off.
Yeah, the Joker spends the entirety of Asylum just being like, Batman, you're crazy, you belong in this asylum. That's literally like half the Joker's dialogue in that game.
Batman should just say, no, I'm high functioning. And then punch him in the mouth. Just like...
Yeah, that reminds me of a scene in Night where basically early on you end up taking a prisoner back to Gotham PD, and he's just hanging out in the cells, and he'll just, whenever you're around him, he'll just start spouting taunting lines based on wherever you are right now. But what it doesn't tell you is that you can walk up right to it, and if you hit the right button, this person completely behind bars, you go to him, and then you break his arm from behind the bars. From through the bars. And then you leave him in insane amounts of pain.
Yeah.
Like, that's not even just... They don't even try to couch that behind, oh, he's a threat or anything like that. It's just, hey, you want to go brutalize this dude? Go ahead.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about, like, why Batman is in the comics often treated, like, why the police often don't cooperate with him, like, yeah, shit like that is why. But the Arkham games just don't seem to realize it at all. And a lot of Batman media doesn't.
So, I think we've aired quite exhaustively what we think the problems with these games are at this point.
Yeah.
What do you two want from the franchise going forward? Because you know they're gonna make more of these.
Yeah.
That's what I want. I want you to stop. I want you to go away.
You stole my response, Colin. This is not okay.
Okay, capital P, capital S, please stop. I honestly could care about these games, but I do not want Rocksteady making another one. I don't fucking trust them anymore.
Well, I still want to see what Rocksteady can make with another franchise. I want to see what they do from here, like with something else.
That's true. I would really like to see Superman throw someone from orbit and then find out, no, it's okay, he's fine.
No, I'm not even talking about superhero stuff anymore. I'm just saying the way that they kind of took a whole combat system and they basically turned a rhythm game into a cool combat system with Arkham Asylum. I still think that they have the capability to innovate and try something interesting. So I would love to see them go and tackle something else entirely besides superheroes. Just see what they could do with something else entirely.
I'm gonna be honest, when Arkham Asylum came out, I just wanted to see the next thing that Rocksteady made. But after seeing what Rocksteady does when they have a successful franchise on their hands, when they have a success and a budget, I kind of, I can't imagine anything that they would do now that would at all get me excited.
Well, and I mean, as we've mentioned on this podcast, even going back to Asylum, Rocksteady has never treated its characters with respect. Harley has always been treated in a pretty upsetting way. They've always had a problem with how they've treated, as we've discussed, and you guys have convinced me of, people with mental illnesses and issues. It's always been really shitty in that way. Yes, they're good at gameplay, and they can be pretty good at level design and atmosphere. But that's a piece of the puzzle. If I want them doing anything, I want them playing second fiddle to a studio that's actually in charge.
God, that's a sad thing to say. It seemed like I'm still not over this, because it seemed like that studio had so much promise. When after Asylum came out, they seemed like one of the best studios in the industry, just all of a sudden.
And I think in a lot of ways they are, but I mean, maybe it is as simple as take them out of Batman and give them different writers and project leads and it'll be okay. Because clearly they've got a whole lot of fucking talent. But I mean, to me, maybe this is a little too harsh and maybe it's not, but to me it's a question of how deep does the rot go? The attitudes that they've shown in these games and the poor judgment and design and social views that they've shown in these games, how much of that is tied up in the series and how much of that is tied up in the studio.
I would be, I actually want to go back and take a look at some of their games before Arkham Asylum. I've always said that their games before have shown how a studio who has produced nothing but mediocre budget titles can eventually pull themselves together and make something amazing. And
they only had one game before Arkham Asylum, didn't they?
I think they've made a couple. But the most recent one before that was this really weird mix of crime fighting and shooter called Urban Chaos Right Response. I want to go back and take a closer look at that and see how much of that attitude is reflected within the Batman games, to see whether there's any hope for them going forward, escaping that stuff.
Yeah, Urban Chaos Riot Response is their only other game. I just checked.
Oh, okay.
That is a hell of a name. That's like, on the one hand, I kind of like that name, but then knowing
where they went, I bet I know what that game is.
Knowing where they went with hyper violence and that E3 trailer they had for Arkham Knight this year,
yeah.
for the Scarecrow DLC.
Oh, that's actually not Scarecrow DLC stuff. That's the intro to the game. Like that's what happens at the very beginning.
And also, you can choose not to shoot. And so, number one, they portrayed that as this is the Scarecrow DLC, and number two, they chose to shoot. Like, for those not aware, this is a sequence where a police officer who is presumably freshly off duty goes into a restaurant, and the owner is like, hey, there's this guy in the corner smoking, can you tell him to knock it off? He goes up, he presumably gets hit in the face with fear gas, and just starts shooting civilians. And that is, like...
That's the way it opens, yeah.
Like, that you choose to show that on the stage at E3 with what has been happening in the last couple of years in... I just don't understand how the fuck they thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, it makes Hardline look smart.
It does.
Like, at least Hardline has the excuse that that game was in deep production before the year turned out like it did.
And also, the Hardline has the excuse where it's like, well, this is what the game is about. How are we supposed to avoid this? This is a Batman game. You didn't need an intro where it was a cop shooting people at a restaurant. You didn't need that.
Yeah, and also right before they kind of... Well, it's kind of doubling up on the disturbing, because at the very beginning... You also you watch Joker, you actually assist in Joker being cremated, because it'll just sit there for a bit, and it's like, no, you need to rotate the analog sticks a bit to get the fire going and watch this body burn a bit, and then...
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, that's how it starts. And, it puts a sour taste in your mouth almost immediately. That never really goes away.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, like... We talk, like... The games critics sphere loves the Arkham games. Quite a lot. Even when Arkham Knight scored very well with most outlets. And we keep having this conversation of, like, oh, where will they go next? And to me, I'm just like, man, like... Can we stop giving them this much slack?
It's this weird situation where, like a week after Arkham Knight came out, within the first few days it was out, I already saw a lot of backlash within the circles that I frequent. And then, like, 1 week later, it was like, hey, this exact cycle happened with BioShock Infinite and all these other games. At some point, this just becomes a thing where critically acclaimed game turns out to be terrible within a week.
Well, but it doesn't, like... This is an article I've been meaning to write, and maybe I'll finally fucking stop dicking around and do it, but, like, games media, the press, the critics, have been trained by precedent and by history and by literal training to care about the gameplay and the graphics, and to kind of, like, when the writing is bad or even disgusting, just kind of be like, it played well. Witcher 3, there are times where you can, like, where Geralt as the main character can sympathize with a man talking about how he had to beat his wife. But, the combat's fun.
Yeah, totally. And, like, it's... Not only are they trained to care more about that, the way it's portrayed is, like, that the gameplay is a factual thing, while questions about the narrative, questions about the writing are, like, personal problems that aren't considered as real.
Yeah, I agree with this on some level, but I also feel like a lot of critics over the years have shown this sign that they are finally moving away from this, and a lot of them receive a lot of hate and backlash for it, but they are still... I feel like I see a lot of people really making the effort to talk about this stuff, to make this an important part of wherever they land on how they feel about the game overall. And I do agree that at this point there's still too much focus on how well it handles over everything else. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of unfair to say nothing is happening, or...
I didn't say nothing is happening, and I wouldn't say nothing is happening. I think a couple of things about that. I mean, I think a lot of this, like... we've almost been talking around it, but, like, Gamergate. Gamergate is a lot of this. Gamergate is a movement of people who want to drown out any kind of social talk at all. And they are the kind of people who want to reinforce the belief that gameplay and graphics are what should matter, and if you talk about anything else, you're biased. And there are people who are obviously and clearly, journalists, I will say, even, there are journalists who are obviously and clearly being pressured by this, and there are people who are maybe being pressured by it without thinking about it, and there are people who are pushing back against that kind of pressure. And I'm not here to say, like, man, you journalists are fucking up, what the fuck is wrong with you? That's not my point at all. They have been doing their job for a long time, and the field is changing, and we're coming to expect more. And I think part of them improving is that we need to apply pressure too. We need to be here saying we expect more. And that is how they will get better. And the industry will be better for that.
Consider this me being, I expect more. I expect a lot more. And we've grown a lot over the last couple of years. Like, both us three as people, I know, but also the field in general. The field of game criticism has grown a lot. People talking about games in general has grown a lot. The conversation has changed rapidly, but it seems like it's changing more slowly at the places that matter the most. Places that get the most traffic are the slowest to change and the slowest to start to accept that perhaps it's time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's why I will keep mentioning it, because I think we need to talk about it more. I think that people don't say it enough, that it's time to improve, it's time to move past this.
I mean, if I want to call myself a games writer, I don't know if I'm not a games journalist, and I don't even know if I'm really a games critic. I do a little bit of writing on the side in my free time. I don't know if I get to earn that title, but if I want to call myself a person who writes about games, I feel like I have a responsibility to bring this up and to pressure the industry to do better. And so I'm going to.
I think I have that responsibility just as a person who cares about the medium. Whether I'm a critic or not, and on and off I have called myself one. Just as a person who cares about criticism and a person who cares about the medium, it seems like, how could I not push?
Yeah. The only way you're going to get better is if you expect better.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
All right. Well, I think this has been a pretty full and thorough conversation. Looking forward to do one of these again in the future. The plan with this podcast, Text But in Words, is that we will do it when we have something to talk about. We're not going to say we're doing it every week or every 2 weeks or every month. It's not a scheduled thing.
Yeah.
But when we have a topic and we feel confident about it, we'll make a podcast. Maybe that'll be tomorrow. Maybe that'll be 2 months from now. I'd like it to be sooner rather than later. But the most important thing is to make it worth listening to. Thank you very much to Johnny for joining us. Maybe we can get you in on some future stuff.
Definitely.
And, thank you everybody for listening. This has been Scanline Media, and have yourselves a good day or night.